Do you ever get the motivation or the idea to do something completely different with your life? To take the baby step, to buy the website domain, to take a break from alcohol, and yet you get stopped in your tracks because of fear? Trust me, I've totally been there before, and I'd love to unpack and give you the tools that I've used to process my fear and move on with the big, beautiful things that I wanted to do in my life. If we haven't met yet before, my name is Karolina Rzadkowska, and I'm an alcohol-free life coach and also the author of the book Euphoric, Ditch Alcohol and Gain a Happier, More Confident You. And fear can come up in so many different ways as we are changing our lives. Changing our lives, I think, is the only constant of life is change. And growing and evolving beyond what our current identities used to be or were is also the point, right? We're never supposed to stay stuck, frozen in time at a certain identity level and not have permission to grow and go after new goals and new dreams. And first, if you're here, obviously changing your relationship with alcohol is that first step in changing your identity, in taking the big leap forward and moving towards the life you really want with beautiful, energetic mornings and feeling so proud of yourself every day and really living the healthy lifestyle you want to live instead of the merry-go-round of not feeling too hot after drinking and being emotionally low afterwards. But fear can also stop us in so many other ways. Fear can stop us from the things we really want in life. Fear can stop us from taking the baby steps on the things that we want, even fun sounding things. So let me give you an example and share a little behind the scenes of what's going on for me in my life. So about 3 weeks ago, my husband and I left the United States and are now in Europe, and we're going to live here for the entire season. Now, that might not sound like a big deal to you, or maybe it does, but it was a big deal to us. So my husband had to quit his job. He had a regular, 9 to 5 job. He worked remotely, but it wasn't something he could actually take on the road. And so we were making this decision a long time ago, a few months ago, about whether or not we'd be able to take this big adventure that we always wanted to take before we settle down and perhaps have kids or just have other times in our lives when we wouldn't be able to just live in Europe the way that we're living. And spoiler alert, we're here, right? I'm right now in a Warsaw apartment in the beautiful neighborhood right next to a farmer's market, next to my grandma's flat. And if you've been watching my stories on Instagram, my grandma's apartment is super teeny tiny. We're staying there too. But my parents are also here. And when my parents and I'm here together, we can barely fit in that flat together. So sometimes I've rented Airbnbs around the city so that we have a little bit more freedom and a little bit more privacy to do some work. But if you're not watching my stories, be sure to do so. So to go check out euphoric.af on your Instagram, and you can follow along my journey. You can see our stories. You can see what I'm up to. We're doing this road trip around Poland this weekend. We're going to go to Wrocław, Poznań, Torun. Sorry, those are very Polish sounding words, but I'm Polish, so that's how I'm going to pronounce them. And we started off in Paris. So we started off in Paris 2 weeks ago and had just a beautiful time in that city. It's one of my favorite cities in the world. And then we've been in Warsaw ever since. Warsaw's my hometown, basically. I was born in the United States, but my entire family still lives in Warsaw. So I've been coming here ever since I was a little girl. And basically, when we're in Warsaw, we see a lot of family, lots of catching up with people I don't normally get to see throughout the year, and then exploring the city. It's super hip, it's super modern, it has a lot of history to it. Obviously, there was atrocities that happened here during World War II, and just so much suffering and pain caused by the German armies and Nazi soldiers and stuff like that. And it's just a testament to the strength and resilience of the city to see it just rebuilding after the just complete destruction that happened in World War II. So that's kind of just a behind the scenes and what's going on in my life. And we're living the dream. But let me go backwards just a little bit about how fear almost stopped us in so many junctures along the way to get to this dream. Obviously, first of all, my husband and I had to make the discussion and have the hard, long talk about him quitting his job, and do we have the financial security and stability to be able to come here and not have his income? And, what's going to happen when we get back? All these different questions. Fear literally could have just zipped the conversation shut and been like, nope, we're not going. It's crazy. We need two incomes. That's just the way it is. And not really come up with other solutions or have the faith that maybe that's not the case, right? Maybe we can actually make this work on our own. And so I had to let the desire of the dream way more than the fear of what we went through to be able to get here, right? And then the next big thing happened, obviously, was that war broke out in Ukraine. And I don't know if you know your geography or not, but we're like 60, 90 miles away from the border of Ukraine. We're not very far from what's going on. You know, there's a lot of refugees here in Warsaw. There's a lot of aid, and my family's been able to be really supportive and like actually donate lots of different goods and food at different train stations. And you can see the support everywhere. Like there's Ukrainian flags everywhere. You know, the Polish flag is white and red, and the Ukrainian flag is blue and yellow, and you just see the blue and yellow throughout the city. It's really beautiful of how much welcoming and how much support there is for that war. But obviously when that happened, it was in the middle of our decision-making process. Like, are we going to go not only stay in Europe, but really make Poland our home base right next to the war in Ukraine? It seemed pretty crazy, right? Like my husband's family was like, what are you guys thinking? That's not safe. My sister, you know, is still concerned, right? Like she's like, make sure you know where the embassy is. But I had to ask myself, am I going to let something that could happen or could never happen, like again, stop me from this goal that I wanted to reach? Every single juncture I get to, there's something that can talk me out of it, right? And I'm just showing you these things as an example so that you can start to see how the fears come up for you. Because sometimes they're irrational, and sometimes they're completely rational, right? Like, obviously, we want to pay the bills, and obviously, we don't want to die in World War III. All of those things seem very, very rational, right? You know, we also had to go through the hoop of leaving behind our dog. So, my dog is my baby. I don't quite have a human baby yet, and so my dog is that for me, right? Like, he is the greatest little love of my life. He's just such a tenderness in my life. And deciding not only to leave him behind was so hard. Like for at first we were researching like how could we take him with us? How could we get him on a boat? Because we didn't want to put him in a plane. He's too big to go in the plane with us. So we'd have to go in the bottom of the plane, and there's just so many horror stories of dogs dying there. And even the Humane Society in the US says that's not a good idea for big dogs. So we were like, okay, maybe there's a boat. Maybe we can do that, right? So we really wanted to make this dream happen and be able to take our dog. And you know, obviously we just decided no, he'll be safest and just most cared for at home in his own house. Like, let's not disrupt his life so much. So then we had to find someone to take care of him for the whole time that we're gone. Another hurdle we had to go through, another like level of fear of not only will someone be able to take care of him, will someone be able to actually love him the way that I love him? And then we did find someone, right? And then there's all the fears of like, what if they're not going to be good enough to watch him? And then right before I left, I had this huge fear of like, what am I doing? How could I live without my dog? He is like he's literally like the love that I have in my heart every day towards this small baby, beautiful thing. He's not a baby, obviously, but it was such a scary thought for me the last week before I left. It's like, what am I doing? How could I live without my dog? How could I really leave him behind? What if he's not here when I get back? All these fears that came up for me then. And so even though like right now I'm here living the dream and we're accomplishing this dream that I've wanted to accomplish for so long, I've wanted to live in Europe. You know, 5 years ago I was still working a 9 to 5 that would never have allowed me to do this, right? And just working each and every baby step of my dream has allowed me to get to this point now where we have the freedom to actually live in different places around the world whenever we want. But it had to start with the first step of doing this trip here and now. And it looks so shiny and it looks so great and magical and oh my gosh, it's so lucky of you. But I mean, there were so many levels of fear that had to be overcome. And it was like, it was as if like if I just went with the flow, if I just went with the flow, if I just went with whatever was easiest and had the path of least resistance, I would have never been here. I wouldn't have come. Because the path of least resistance was to not have my husband change his career and to not, you know, to stay at home where it's safe in San Diego and not go literally next door to Ukraine and to not leave behind my sweet baby boy, you know? Like there's so many ways that the path of least resistance would have kept me stuck doing the same thing I was always doing. And so this story is really just here to illustrate a point that, you know, you might not be having fears about going on a big trip or a travel. Maybe you can't relate to that or it's just something different for you. But at no matter what point we get to, no matter what we want to do, even if it sounds so good, like I want to write a book and I really want to be an author, or I want to launch a business and I really want to leave behind this career in finance, or I really want to stop drinking alcohol for good and be really happy alcohol free. No matter how good the outcome sounds, we're always going to have to deal with the fears that come up with it. And the fears that come up with it might be purely very logical. They might sound like they make a lot of sense. Like, well, most businesses fail, and 4 out of 5 businesses are out of business by the 5th year. You know, all the statistics that come out. We literally might be able to logically explain away our dreams. But it's not the logic. Reality is whatever you make out of it, right? It's actually fear that's stopping us. It's fear that's preventing us from taking the next step. Because here's the thing. Anytime you want to do something you really want to do, something that is really on your heart, like taking a next big step in your life of changing careers or writing a book or ditching alcohol for good, you're going to venture into some place called the unknown. You've never been there before. You've never been a person who has written a book. And so when you venture into the unknown, you leave behind the known, you leave behind the familiar, you leave behind a comfort zone of sorts. And that comfort zone of sorts could be very painful for you. It could be very like, oh my God, I'm just so stuck and I hate this reality and this is just not how I'm happy and I want more than this, I want more than this. It might not feel good, that comfort zone, but it's literally what you know. It's what you know and it's what you used to, and at least you can deal with the pain of that. You don't know about the pain of the future, of the unfamiliar. So we stay stuck and we don't take action. And the thing is while it may feel safer because you're doing something that you know the shape of it, you know the status quo, you know what that feels like, that's also where your soul goes to die. That's also where the deepest regrets of your life will come from, of never venturing out of the familiar into the unknown, of never trusting yourself enough and trusting the universe enough to take care of you and to be able to figure it out. That's when you're going to be 90 years old, looking back and wishing so much that you wish you took a chance, that you wish you took a risk. The thing is that we think that things are so risky when we do something different. And obviously, I share all this because this is how the brain is wired. I am not immune to any of these fears. I just shared with you literally every single fear that I had to go through to come do this dream trip to Europe. The fear is all there because it's literally how we're hardwired as humans. It's a biological evolutionary function in our brain to protect us from dying, to protect us from getting eaten by saber-toothed tigers. But just because we evolved with that fear and that protection mechanism doesn't mean it always serves us, especially in a world that doesn't really have as many threats anymore. You know, we're not hunter-gatherers, that could possibly be eaten or killed by the next snowstorm. Our life is completely different today as modern humans. And yet the same wiring is happening. And so when you face that fear, when you're wanting to take the next step, but something is stopping you, something is not letting you move forward because you're scared that something worse will happen if you take the next step, that you'll run out of money, or that you'll fail, or that you will be embarrassed or humiliated, or that all of these bad things that you worry about could happen. You won't be able to pay the mortgage, like whatever your fears are, right? Here are some steps that you can use to actually combat them. And before I share that real quick, I just want to end with this too. We believe that taking the next step forward is risky. Because like I said, it feels risky because it's unknown and we're doing something new. It feels risky because there's a lot that could go wrong, we think. But we don't recognize how risky it is to stay the same. We think making an investment is risky. We think going for the relationship is risky. We think moving to Europe is risky. We think moving to a country right next to a country that's at war with Ukraine is risky. We think all these things are risky. We always think that action is risky. We don't actually recognize that not taking the action is risky. If you don't invest your money, for example, your money will just one day go poof with inflation. So yes, it might feel riskier to invest in the stock market, but it's actually even riskier to keep it all in cash. It's also risky to not invest in yourself because you are your biggest asset. And all the little things that we pay for all the time will one day not matter and go away, and you're the only thing you're left with. You and your dreams and your capability and belief to go after them. It is risky to not take the trip that you've always wanted to take in because one day you'll be regretting it. It's all risky. You just have to decide which risk you're willing to experience. And fear can stop me, for sure. It's definitely stopped me, and it's definitely stopped me more, not just from not doing what I want, but just not taking the action, right? It's so much easier to not take the action. We just think we don't have time for it, or it's just too much to manage. But I've always been so much more fulfilled when I've done the thing and been scared anyway. You know, sometimes it's been asking a hero of mine to be on my podcast, or pitching myself to like a big media outlet, or taking the leap of faith and having my husband quit his job so we can move to Europe. It's all these different things that have had so much fear, and yet they've felt so wildly freeing when you take the action. Committing to an alcohol-free period, committing to be alcohol-free for me forever, right? Whatever it is for you that you have fear around. So first of all, to combat this fear, let me give you some tools now that we understand where it is, where it's coming from, how we're going to be facing it for the rest of our lives, and yet how to have a process to actually manage it. So the first thing I recommend you to do is to actually allow your brain to finish the thought. So there's a fear there. There's a fear of not wanting to move forward in some particular way in your life. And it's probably because you're scared of some kind of consequence. Now, the thing is that we don't name the consequence. We just think that bad things will happen if I do this. We don't actually go down and say the worst case scenario. And this is a really helpful exercise because once you go through this process of actually naming what the worst case scenario is, you'll often find that one, it's either not that bad, or two, it's very unlikely to happen, and three, you're strong enough to manage it. So for example, when I was around a year and a half into my business, I felt ready to go full-time. I felt ready to leave behind my day job and do full-time into Euphoric. Super scary, right? How am I going to pay the bills? Is it going to break up my marriage? Is it going to, just cause so many financial problems? Am I going to eat up all my savings? All these fears. What if the clients don't come? What if it doesn't work out? So many fears attached to it. But basically what I did in that scenario, and this is a really good one to do it with because a lot of times we have so much fear about leaving behind a stable job, is to actually ask yourself, what's the worst thing that would happen? So for me, the worst thing that would happen, I started going down kind of the rungs and recognizing that, okay, well, first of all, if I can't generate enough money to support us, we would start eating through our savings. And if I eat through our savings, then we'll have no savings and my husband will get pretty upset with me. Could even start creating rifts in our marriage. That sucks, right? And, then we'd have to move in with my parents if we can't afford our mortgage. So I'd move in back with my parents. And I kept going down, okay, so I'm living back with my parents, my husband resents me and wants to get a divorce. There it is. There's the worst thing that would happen. I would go move back in with my parents and my husband would want to divorce me. Now, moving in back with my parents is actually not the worst thing that could ever happen in my life. I love my parents. I am not going to have that much more time with them on this planet, and I understand that. And literally the worst thing that could ever happen is for me to go live with my parents. Not that big of a deal. But then the other fear I uncovered that, okay, what if I break up my marriage? That was actually scary. That was like, wow, I don't want that to happen. That's the most important thing in my life. And I had to actually be able to see that fear surface to the top of my consciousness to be able to deal with it. And I had a really good friend, that I shared this with, and she shared Mac with me. Carolina, do you know what else would break up a marriage? Resentment. Resentment that you swallowed your dreams to keep your husband feeling comfortable or you feeling comfortable. He didn't even say anything. But then blaming him over time as the reason why you didn't go for your dream. That could also break up a marriage. And I was like, oh my God, you're right. And I started to see that this fear I had of ending my marriage is actually less likely to happen if I go for my dream and more likely to happen if I don't. And so I was able to work through that fear too. So take whatever fear you're facing, whether it's committing to an alcohol-free lifestyle or taking a break, whether it's going and quitting your job, whether it's starting your own business, and list out the worst thing that you think could happen. Ask yourself, is it that bad? Could I manage through this? Is it very likely to happen? And is it even really that logical that that would happen? Or are there other things that could actually produce that result even faster? For example, if you took a break from alcohol and you failed, and that's the thing you're scared about, I mean, isn't not drinking for like 90% of the time and having one slip up, isn't a success rate of not drinking for 90% of the time way better than drinking every day? I mean, it's ridiculous what we think a failure is, right? So go through that and actually list out what the worst case scenario is. Now, the second way that I deal with fear is by matching fear with regret. So yes, there's fear. There's always fear. There's always fear in the next step, right? There's fear in getting the next step up the rung in any dimension of your life that you're moving and growing towards, whatever that looks like for you. And honestly, I work with so many women to not only ditch alcohol, but to discover their greater purpose. So I'm using examples that don't just relate to alcohol. I'm talking about going for your business. I'm talking about writing your own book. Because that's what's next. It's not just about ditching alcohol, it's the next purpose for your life. And there's so many fears that come up with that. So we have the fear here. The fear will be there. We can dispel it. We can logically process it. We can debunk it. We can work with a coach on it. But here's another thing over here. And this is called regret. This is called regret for not doing the thing you really want to do. And the funny thing is that we think that so many external situations are stopping us from going for the life that we want. And it's so mostly like 90% in our head. It's us. We're the things that are stopping ourselves from going after the thing we want. And regret will one day show you that. Regret will one day show you, like, why didn't I do that? Why was I so stuck in that fear or stuck in inaction? Why didn't I just take the little action? You know, I look back, obviously I love traveling, and I look back at my 20s. And I went to college, and then I went to grad school, and I was about 23 when I was ready for the job market, right? Because I went to grad school right after college. And I got a job right away, and then I was like, okay, I gotta save up money, and I gotta pay this, buy a house eventually, and I gotta be serious. And I look back now, and I'm like, why didn't I just travel then? Like, why didn't I take a year off and just see the world? There was no urgency. The urgency I thought I had back when I was 23 to get serious and get a job and start paying the things you're supposed to pay for when you're an adult, there was no urgency back there. It was a false sense of urgency because everyone's like, oh, you need your resume, start working on it. There was nothing standing in my way to go and travel for a year. And there's part of me that regrets that today. And so what are you going to regret in the future that you're not doing today? Because we have every single chance in this world, if you're still talking, if you're still breathing, if you're still alive in this moment, you have every chance you need in front of you to still do the thing that you're doing, you want to do. It's not too late. And you're going to look back and be like, why didn't I do that thing when I was 40? Why didn't I do the thing when I was 50? Why didn't I go swimming more when I was 60? I had a much nicer body then than I do when I'm 90. So weighing in on what's going to feel worse, the regret of not doing what you want, can often be the thing that tricks me into saying, oh gosh, I got to go for it. And the third thing to recognize, I think, too, is that there are other people on this planet going after what you want. And they are no different from you. They are not made out of different materials than you. They are the same version of you in a different iteration on this planet. And they just decided to do the thing. They just decided that they're not going to let their mindset stop them. And maybe that makes you jealous. I know it's made me jealous when I see people doing things that I want to do that are bigger than what I'm doing today. That makes me jealous. I'm like, I want that. But what they show me is that we are all capable of that. And the only thing I need to do it is to decide. There's nothing standing in my way. I just have to decide. So if you want to launch a business, what's stopping you right now from getting a website domain? Literally, they're like $20. Go find the website domain of what you want and launch your business. If you want to write a book, what's stopping you right now to draft up an outline of what would be in the book? If you want to start sharing advice with women, what's stopping you right now from creating a social media account and sharing your first piece of advice? If you want to travel more, what's stopping you from booking a ticket and going there sometime this year? Really, what is stopping us from these things? I mean, is there really anything stopping us from buying a domain name? That's $20. That's very easy to figure out if you use the Google. Other than fear, all of these things are actually so much simpler than we make them out in our head. And it's fear that stops us from moving ahead. So using these 3 tools of actually playing out the worst case scenario, weighing in regret versus fear of not doing what you really want, and also looking around and seeing other people doing it. Don't just see them, don't just be jealous of them, but use them as your mentors. If someone has a life that you want, and especially if they teach about it and they share how they got to where they got, and that's part of their role on this planet is to help others achieve what they've achieved, go learn from them. Go get a mentor. Start thinking the way that other people think will change your life. And I know that that's why I'm so obsessed with coaching myself, is because coaching has stretched me to change the primary mode of thinking from fear to faith. And it's not 100% across the board. I still have so much fear, and I will for the rest of my life. But now I have all these tools to be able to work through it. So if you are feeling stuck in any kind of fear of failure, fear of success, that's a big one too, fear of taking action, perfectionism, indecision, all of these things are just a code name for fear. Be sure to use the tools that I've shared in this video to move past it, to actually see what you're really scared of, to, flesh out that worst case scenario, and to give yourself the motivation to just go for it. You will never regret just going for it. Whatever it is you're just go for it means for you, just go for it. Literally, in 6 decades, if I'm lucky, I'm not going to be here anymore. In 6 decades, my life will be over, my body will be decaying in the earth. I won't be on this planet anymore. And 6 decades is going to go by like that. I don't have time to waste on this planet. I'm going to live the life I really want to live, and you should too. You deserve it, you are worthy of it, and you can achieve it. I'll see you next week.